Well, hi everyone. Welcome to Advancing Liver Care, the role of clinical trials in liver health. Today, we're very excited to have Dr. Noureddin, an internationally recognized hepatologist and leader in clinical trial research, to speak on this topic. Before we begin, I'm just going to introduce myself in the webinar series. My name is Marissa, and I'm the engagement coordinator at Global Liver Institute. This webinar is part of the Tackling Liver Cancer Disparities, held in collaboration with the Health Council of South Florida and the Southeast Florida Cancer Control Collaborative. And I'll pass it over to Vicki to introduce herself and the organization.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Vicki. I'm the regional coordinator for the Southeast Florida Cancer Control Collaborative. I'm also a community health and data specialist with the Health Council of South Florida. So a little bit about our organization. The HCSF is a trusted regional organization which is dedicated to improving health and wellness in Miami-Dade and Monroe counties here in Florida. And for over 50 years, we have provided unbiased health data on strategic planning and community service while fostering collaboration and advocating for equitable healthcare policies. And the collaborative is a voluntary network of healthcare providers as well as community organizations and advocates working together to reduce the burden of cancer across Southeast Florida. Which is supported administratively by the Health Council, and it promotes education, advocacy, and research to improve access to cancer care in our region. So thank you once again for joining in. Thank you, GLI, for partnering with us.
Great, thank you, Vicki. So how this webinar is going to be structured is Dr. Noureddin is going to give a brief introduction of his experience in clinical trials and the importance of clinical trials for liver care. We can open it up to more of a dialogue structure and have an open-ended questions. So thank you so much for being here with us today, and I'll pass it over to you to get started.
Let me introduce myself. Thank you for the introduction, but as you said, I'm a hepatologist, and I have been doing clinical research, for 20 years. I sound old now, but 20 plus years. And I think it's very complementary or essential to clinical care. And I'll give you throughout example of my career. So I'll just explain my career in addition to my training in internal medicine and gastroenterology and hepatology. I've been doing research throughout my career, especially clinical trials. And prior to residency, I had the pleasure and the honor to be a clinical research coordinator, actually myself, for a year or so. I was waiting for my residency to start. And then after that, I continued to be as a sub-I and then PI, was sub-I meaning primary investigator, and PI is the primary investigator. And I also have been a global primary investigator, and I'll explain all that in a second for multiple trials. So if you want to break it down, the clinical trials is coordinators are the people that they do the work. They bring the patients, they follow up the visits, and they have different kind of coordinators. Some draw blood, some as the phlebotomist to do those, some administer medications, some have pharmacists to administer medication. It depends on the medications. And primary investigator is usually a person who works under the primary investigator that double check things with the primary investigator, where they do double check on the labs, sometimes examine patients and stuff like this. And it could be a physician or nurse practitioners. And the primary investigator is the assigned person in a site that is responsible for a certain trial for the well-being of the patients and for the well conduct of the trial itself. And when I mention a global PI, it's usually a person who helps the sponsors co-designing the protocol and conducting the trial and analyzing the data and looking at various things within the trial. So as I mentioned, I started early in my career being a research coordinator, and within liver disease, it was kind of like a wake-up moment that, well, these patients don't have medications, and we're working on something that eventually gonna provide them with approved medications after the trial when the FDA approved the medicine. And I have been fortunate to see from the extreme not having therapies all the way to cure. And I'll give you the example of that. One of the disease that I worked on early in my career, before being a PI, is hepatitis C. And for those that they don't know hepatitis C, it used to be a chronic virus that affects the liver and actually, and unfortunately, killed a lot of people. A lot of people died from liver cirrhosis and liver cancer due to hepatitis C. And in my lifetime, there were clinical trials that they were conducted. This is again during my training and before that, clinical trials that started being conducted in these patients. And many years before the approved therapy, these trials actually started working on these patients. I'm talking about before 2013. And then these patients started coming to these clinical trials and getting a pill that eventually cured the virus. So many of these patients actually in their lifetime got access to these medications before millions of patients because they were part of the clinical trials. So they got cured and they prevented from going to transplant and cirrhosis and liver cancer. And that was like a wake up moment in my career that, yeah, there are patients that can wait for a long time, but some patients that they go on clinical trials, they can benefit early before they get in trouble and the disease gets worse. Also, in these trials, unfortunately, you always have to have a placebo in these trials. And I tell my patients, yeah, that's how trials works. Sometimes you have diseases that you don't have other options. So if you don't have any medications approved, um, uh, at least you're increasing your chances of getting something that might be helpful. And eventually, a lot of trials after the placebo, if they get approved, you get on the drug, and also get um, some trials get you on what's called an extension, where they give you the medicine. So that was in the liver disease a great moment when we started having treatment for hepatitis C. And that was during my training and a little bit after my training. And moving on, when I became a PI, I started taking care of a disease called MASH now, which is metabolic associated steatohepatitis, that people can get to cirrhosis and liver cancer, liver transplant, and it took over hepatitis C as the most common liver disease. So when I started doing this for good, I want to say 7, 8 years or a little bit longer, there were no medications for this disease. It was just weight loss and exercise, despite having various stages of the disease with a little bit scarring, more scarring, a lot of scarring, cirrhosis. And patients, not everyone succeeded to get weight loss and exercise. And a lot of them progressed on our watch, as they say. And there were a lot of failures with therapies until 2, 3 years ago when we get the first FDA drug approved for MASH. And then the second drug approval happened as well. And I continue to have a joy of extending therapies to these patients because there are more medications coming in the pipeline to add to what we have. And I'll give you an example from 2025 when we did a trial on MASH cirrhotic people, and we saw some reversibility of cirrhosis in some patients, which is something we didn't expect that will happen, but it started happening, and this drug is still in clinical trials. So a lot of great things happen to our patients within clinical trials, and a lot of benefits that these patients got for themselves, but also they help entire community of patients out there. Millions of people, for instance, they have MASH that are now having options because of other patients that are participating in clinical trials. And we continue to raise the bar in terms of efficacy, meaning how many patients benefits, and also like more stubborn stages of the disease, such as cirrhosis, to reverse it. So clinical trials is, in contrast to a lot of patients, what patients thinks is like, oh, they can experiment on me. I tell people is like, I will not give you something I will not give my family or my sister or my mother or my cousin. And we choose the trials carefully, and we try to help our patients as much as we can. So always the patients are the front line, but also they are the center of our attention, and they are the ones that we are trying to extend options for them that are otherwise are not available for millions of people. And what I say about clinical trials, I say the future medicine is here today. So I totally encourage people to look into what is out there available, and be part of like helping themselves and helping millions of people out there. So that's a long summary and long roundabout about my career. Still, this is a brief summary overall of now two decades of being coordinator, sub-I, PI, having patients, and it's beyond being a doctor, like helping one patient at a time. These clinical trials can help thousands and millions eventually of people out there. So it's on both sides. Patients could be helping millions in addition to themselves, and the coordinators and the PIs can be helping also millions of people. How does that sound as a summary?
No, that was super interesting. Thank you for your sharing your experience. Anyone have any questions or?
Laura, are you, what do you do, Laura?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm a Colombian hematology and clinical oncology specialist. I recently moved to the US 2 years ago, but 4 months ago, I started my career here in the US as clinical research coordinator. Now I'm working with a new project of gastric cancer and gastroesophageal cancer. But we have a lot of trials running here in different types of cancer by grants or by the pharmaceutical industry. And I think this is a huge opportunity for us to see different types of the same disease or the same condition. We, as a clinical specialist, and seeing patients on the other side, like where everything is beginning, it's a huge opportunity for me, and I'm glad to see you and meet you today.
Great. And which state you're in, Laura?
I'm in Florida. I'm in Mount Sinai Medical Center and the Cancer Research Center.
Yeah, and this is you work on a very difficult diseases, like gastric cancer is one of the harder ones. And I know a friend of mine actually lost his father to gastric cancer. So kudos to what you do, and hopefully we'll find a cure to these cancers. Many cancers now are curable, and we have like you guys heard about immunotherapies and CAR T cell and all these things, and this is just fascinating what is happening, and we're trying to overcome difficult diseases like this over time. So, and that's the concept, right? That science brings those for patients. The way this goes that we start the studies on in the bench, like cells, animal data, and then in the phase ones, there are small population of patients, usually focusing on the safety of the drug and some efficacy. and there are also what's called hepatic impairment, make sure the liver is metabolizing the drug regardless of the disease they're being tested on. And there's some for kidneys, and eventually they move from phase 2A, 2Bs, phase 3. And after the phase 3 is the approval, and there's the phase 4, which is post-marketing, to make sure the drug is also efficacious and safe in large number of people. So yeah, that's exciting, and welcome to research.
What do you think are the biggest barriers in conducting these clinical trials?
Say that again.
What do you think are the biggest barriers in conducting these clinical trials and getting patients?
Yeah, and I think perception of patients that this is experimental. And I tell my patients, especially when you get to phase 3, is there are hundreds of patients that they're trying this medication. And here's the list of the side effects, here's the list of the benefits, and the informed consent will tell you like what is going on in this study. And there are, to assure patients, like they're very, very regulated, especially the FDA, is like patients come first. The subject, what we call in clinical trials, have the process is extremely vetted, and there are very strict rules on how to conduct a trial with a very close monitoring that the patients go through. And a lot of times you'll be surprised how much like a free care and additional labs these patients will get, or additional testing that will benefit them otherwise. I mean, there were trials that we start screening for patients and we caught early cancers here and there. They didn't qualify for the trial, but they extended something for them that, oh, oops, like it could have been missed and with regular care. So perception is one of the things, being the placebo, the other thing, but I mentioned that a lot of patients get rolled into the open extension arm, or the drug gets approved. And of course, access, like they live far or something like this, but many clinical trials provide transportation, translation, and we always focus also on diversity in our clinical trials.
How do clinical trials work on like a more of a global sense? If clinical trials being done in one country, do they have to redo the results in another country? Do they share the results?
Yeah, so it depends on the trial as well. So we're fortunate in the United States that we're the biggest hub probably for clinical trials, and most sponsors want to go through the FDA approval in the United States. And many trials start in the preclinical, clinical, preclinical research done somewhere. Then you go to the phase 1, it's being done in the US, and the phase 2 is being done entirely in the US, but phase 3 usually is international. So the sponsor will go to some organization called CROs or IROs, where they orchestrate the research among sites, and they put certain number in the United States, certain number in Europe, certain number in Asia, and different countries of the world, where it's being conducted at the same time, same standards, same procedures, and make it generalizable all over the world.
Interesting. I'm sure that helps a lot with the diversity effects of clinical trials.
Which is very important. Even within the US, doesn't have to be international. We have we're melting pot, right, in the United States. So we it is the multiple trials by the regulators are required to have a certain number of each ethnicity and race, and otherwise the trial is not generalizable.
Are there any clinical trials that you're either currently working on or know of that you think are going to be super helpful in the liver space?
Oh my God, so I work on a research center and a research network called the Pinnacle Network, which we own. We have 20 sites within the network, but also I'm part of a bigger network called the Summit Research Clinical Network, which is we have 120 sites that we coordinate the research and organize it. So I'm sitting here now in a research, one of the research centers, Houston Research Institute in one of its location in West Houston, and has multiple locations throughout the city. And in this site, we have 32 trials that are currently active. And I finished clinic earlier, and my research team was working parallelly seeing research patients. And I'll give you an example. We had this patient who came to us for weight loss trial, and we actually checked his liver, and unfortunately it turned that he has advanced liver disease, but he was not aware, and we caught it. So now we are, he didn't qualify for that study that we're going to screen him for, but now at least he knows that he has an underlying liver disease, and we're going to take care of him.
Thank you so much. This has all been super interesting. Anyone else?
Absolutely. It's clinical trials is the way that medicine will progress and will defeat diseases over time. And Laura, thank you for what you work on and cancer, which is a very important area that can unfortunately kill patients, and we need to find treatments for it.
Yeah, I loved what you said about the future of medicine is here today. I absolutely agree with that.
Indeed. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the Global Liver Institute for what you guys do.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yes. All right.
Well,
So I guess we'll go to lunch, all of us.
Yes.
All right, you all. Thank you so much for having me again.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.